Right. Good morning. Today I'm going to present on your Chinese and dialectal and parameterization, looking especially at Mandarin and Cantonese. This is the method that I've used in teaching Chinese to foreign students, especially Mandarin and Cantonese. Before I begin, I'd like to thank many people who have made this work possible, especially my mentors in the past who taught me foreign languages as well as linguistics. Earlier versions of this work were presented to members of the of um, Ronan as well as ILM, and I greatly appreciated the feedback that I got from fellow researchers. And finally, I must thank my students whom I taught Chinese in the past. I greatly enjoy teaching them, and they made me to understand much more about my native language, and so teaching made me learn a lot about my native language as well. All right. Now, first of all, a bit of background on myself. So, I work on Chinese linguistics, and that's because, I'm a Chinese myself. I was born in Hong Kong. And, I grew up in the 90s before the handover in 1997 when Hong Kong was still a British colony. And Hong Kong was, and still is, a triglossic society, which means that, there were three main languages in use. So Cantonese was a native vernacular which everyone used. We learned Mandarin at school. It was the literary formal written version of Chinese that we learned. And then we also learned English because English was the colonial language. I then studied in the UK at a school called Sherborne School, where I did mainly a Western languages. So I did Latin, I did Greek. I also learned some Romance language, especially Spanish. So I specialize in classical and Romance languages. I continued these at Oxford, where I did classics and the modern languages. So I continued with classical languages as well as Romance. I then did my master's at Manchester. Yeah, so I'm very happy to be here today, back at Ma Manchester. Well, I did my master's in languages and linguistics, where I specialize in linguistic theory. I then continued my research in linguistics at the University of York. All right, so this is a brief outline of my career as a linguist. Now, in terms of Chinese. I've done a bit more because since 2009, I've been a UK public service interpreter. So I've been offering, a face-to-face as well as telephone interpreting. I've also been teaching languages, mainly Chinese, especially, so both Mandarin and Cantonese, which I began at the Manchester International Society. So again, I'm very happy to be here back at Manchester, where I can tell you how it all began. So I started during my graduate career in 2011 to 2014, and then during COVID. I also offered, some teaching at the Manchester, in International Society. I'm also a UK Uncharted linguist. So, since 2017, I've been, a UK CL. I'm also a freelance journalist. So, I've got this column on Asia Times where I've been talking about Chinese socio linguistics with focus on Hong Kong. And I'm also a member of the Save Cantonese. That's a 501c3 organization in the US that aims to promote some Cantonese around the world. Yeah. So again, in addition to my research, I've also been doing some other things as well, for which I've been using ch Chinese as my language. Now, in terms of teaching Chinese. Yeah, so my career began at Manchester, International Society, and the numbers are quite interesting. I mean, yeah, so I've taught you both Mandarin and Cantonese. I began in 2011, and in my first year, I only taught Mandarin. So in my first term, I had three students of Mandarin. In my second term, I had a full plate. I had 10, so it was a full course. In my second year in 2012, I taught both Mandarin and Cantonese. And yeah, so in my in the spring term, I had three Cantonese students versus one in Mandarin. In the summer term, I also had three students of Cantonese versus one student of Mandarin. In the winter term, I had five students of Cantonese versus three students in Mandarin. 2013, I had a big group. It was eight students of Cantonese versus two students of Mandarin. In the summer term, I had five students of Cantonese versus one student in Mandarin. And finally, in the COVID time where I offered, Mandarin online, I only had one student of Cantonese. So, the numbers, especially between 2012 and 2013, I actually had more students in Cantonese than in Mandarin. So this perhaps shows that, the interest in Mandarin is probably bigger than most people think, even though Mandarin is the official, type of Chinese. There was, and probably still is, a very big interest in Cantonese. In terms of teaching, both Mandarin and Cantonese, I've discovered that, yeah, so cartography, which is how, formal linguists, you look at the similarities as well as the differences between languages. This has proven to be quite useful. So this is, part of my research, and I've been applying this research to my teaching strategy. The idea is that, yeah, so it's very common that we look at the clausal and the nominal domains. And Chinese is quite similar to English and Romantic, because Chinese has a head initial. Okay, so it makes it easy. It makes it possible for Western speakers to appreciate Chinese word order. Yeah, so commonly. This is the structure that people often use for head initial languages such as Chinese. So if I just illustrate this particular structure, all right. So for example, in Mandarin, we can say 他会想回家吧. Okay, so subject, then tense, modal, verb, object, then the sentence final particle. In Cantonese, it's exactly the same. 佢會想返屋企啩. Okay, so this means, he will want to go home. So okay, so it's a guess. And also, another example is 如果他来的话. Okay, 如果佢嚟嘅話. So, if she comes, okay, we've got, a complementizer, then subject, then verb, then SFP. The nominal structure, again, is commonly held to be something like this. So, for example, in Mandarin, we could say, so, 这朵很美的花. In Cantonese, it would be 呢朵好靚嘅花. Okay, so demonstrative, classifier, adjective, then noun. So this very beautiful flower. Or, 我的三辆车. So possessor, the possessive particle, the number, classifier, noun. Okay, so my three cars. So, these two head initial structures, are very common. And, they also underlie Chinese, both Mandarin and Cantonese. Now, there are some differences between, Cantonese and Mandarin that are, worth pointing out. So, for example, verbal endings. Like Chinese is full of verbal endings, and they express different type of tense, mood, and aspect, TAN. And also, they can sort of express different argument structures as well. Okay, so Cantonese has many more, verbal endings than standard Mandarin, where the three most common, verb endings in Mandarin are le, zhi, and guo. Okay, as Sun Shaofen has pointed out. For example, in order to express the progressive aspect, so that's equivalent to the English ing form. Right, okay. Mandarin, uses zhe. Cantonese, however, has two forms. It's either ju or gan. Okay. I mean, Mandarin zhe is really equivalent to Cantonese ju. Okay, so if you have this sentence, it means it's raining outside. 外面正在下着雨. Okay, the exact Cantonese counterpart will be 外面響度落住雨. Okay, so 下着雨 versus 落住雨. Mandarin 者 is equivalent to Cantonese 住. However, in Cantonese, it's also impossible to use 敢. Okay. And there's no equivalent in Mandarin. So, in Cantonese, we could say 外面響度落緊雨. Okay, 落緊雨. And yeah, so there's no equivalent in Mandarin for this. And so, this would we would have to leave out the verb ending here. All right, so the difference between ju and gun is that so ju denotes state, whereas gun denotes ongoing action. Okay, so in this particular example, 外面落住雨, this is the weather condition, whereas 外面響度落緊雨, so this denotes the ongoing action of raining. Okay, so this is well known. Also, there are some, very subtle micro differences between, Cantonese and the Mandarin verb endings. So, a very common Mandarin verb ending is 得到. So verb 得到. In Cantonese, however, there are two forms, which are not exactly the same, but sort of similar. So, we could say either verb 到 or verb 斗. Now, 得到 in Mandarin denotes some possibility or ability. Okay, so 做到 that means can be done, doable. In Cantonese, however, we say 做到 or 做得, and they mean slightly different things. 做到 means can do or can be done. So 做到 is the equivalent to Mandarin 得到. This also denotes possibility or ability. But however, it really denotes some permission. So it can, in the sense of being allowed to. It can be done. It's allowed to do. Okay, so if I just use some examples here. In Mandarin, we could say 这件事办得到. Okay, so this thing can be done. 办得到. In Cantonese, however, if I say 呢件事做到, it means so this can be done. So it's possibility, exactly like Mandarin 办得到. But Cantonese 做得, it really means permission. Okay, so this thing can be done. So verb 斗 and verb 当, they denote two slightly different types of modality, namely possibility and permission, respectively. And finally, similar morphemes seem to have wider distribution in Cantonese, and that they can be suffixed with a wider range of verbs. So, for example, sai means to do the verb and apply the verb to all of its objects, to all of its arguments, and it's equivalent to Mandarin Guang. And if we compare Mandarin and Cantonese, if we use one place verbs, like for example 死 or 谁, it means die. So 他们死光了. Okay, so they all died. In Mandarin, it'll be 佢哋死晒啦. That's absolutely fine. If we apply the word 光 or 晒 to the two place verbs, such as for example 吃 or 食, it means eat. So it's a two place verb. In Mandarin, 我们吃光食物. This is, I think, it's borderline grammatical because we can't really use 光 with the two place verbs. Whereas in Cantonese, we can definitely use 晒. So 我哋食晒啲食物. Okay, so we ate all the food. We apply this verb to the object. 我哋食晒啲食物. We ate all the food. And also, with three place verbs such as, 给 or 俾, which means give. Yeah, in Mandarin, this is definitely out. We definitely cannot say 我们给光钱给他们. That's absolutely wrong. You cannot say 给光, give all. In Mandarin, in Cantonese though, this is perfectly fine. 我哋俾晒啲錢俾佢哋. Okay, so we gave them all our money. Right, so if we compare the sai and its equivalent in Mandarin Guang, Sai can be a suffix to all types of verbs, whereas guang cannot. Guang seems to be only applicable to one place verbs. Right, another type of variation between Mandarin and Cantonese is word order. So the same adverbs can occur in different word orders. For example, yeah, so the two most famous examples are 先 or 先, which means before, and then 多 and 少, which means more or less. Right, is that the idea is that in Mandarin these tend to be pre-verbal, whereas they tend to be post-verbal in Cantonese and other dialects as well. So for example, a very famous example, 我们先走了, okay? In Cantonese, it's 我哋行先啦. Okay, the 先 comes after the verb 行. Okay, we go first or we leave first. 我们先走了 versus 我哋行先啦. Similarly with 多 and 少, in the Mandarin, we would say 你们多吃一点 或者少吃一点呢. Whereas in Cantonese, we would put 多 and 少, 多 and 少 after the verb. 你哋食少啲,你哋食多啲, etc. So, in Mandarin, we put these adverbs before the verb, whereas in Cantonese, we put them after the verb. Now, there's a little bit more to this story. Is that yeah, if we look at the clause structure again here, so we've got this clause structure which applies to all Chinese dialects. So if we look at this example where it's 我们先喝酒了. Okay, so we've got the 先, which is the adverb before the verb. The Cantonese equivalent is 我哋飲酒先啦. Okay, so both of these examples mean I first drink wine or I drink wine first. In Cantonese, the 先, the adverb, comes after the object. So it really comes after the verb and the object. So it comes after the verb phrase. So whereas in Mandarin, 先 comes before the verb phrase here, drink wine. In Cantonese, 先 comes after the verb phrase, 饮酒先. With 多 and 少, however, it's a bit different. So, in Mandarin, we would put 多 and 少 before the verb. So, for example, 你们多喝一点吧, 或者你们少喝一点吧. We put the 多 and 少 before the verb. In Cantonese, however, we will put these just after the verb. So, for example, 你飲多啲啦 or 你飲少啲啦. Okay. So, there seems to be a structural difference between 先 and 多 and 少in that 多 and 少, we put them, as adjacent to the verb, straight after the verb, before any object. Okay, so in terms of categories, seen in the Cantonese comes after the verb phrase, so it seems to be a true adverb that comes after the verb phrase. Where 多 and 少, these seem to be non-thematic complements to the verb. They come straight after the verb. All right, so Cantonese seen 多 and 少, in terms of categories, they're not exactly the same, even though they all come after the verb. Right, and finally, in terms of the noun structure, there are also some micro variations that are worth noting. So yeah, if we look at the noun structure, so this is the typical Chinese noun skeleton. Um, yeah, in Mandarin, we could say so 这狗 or 那些狗. Okay, so demonstrative classifier than noun. Okay, this is a very common structure. It's them CL noun. 这只狗, 这些狗, 那只狗, 那些狗, etc. It means the or this or these dogs, etc. In Cantonese, the equivalent forms are 呢隻狗, 呢啲狗, 嗰隻狗, 嗰啲狗, etc. And these means this or that or those dogs. However, it's also possible to leave out the them and just have 隻狗 or 啲狗. So just having the classifier plus the noun. And this would mean something like the dog or the dogs. The classifier seems to be functioning as an article here in denoting reference. definiteness as well as number, because here, 隻狗 and 啲狗 denote a different numbers. So, in terms of the structure here, in Cantonese, it's possible to leave out the dem um, and just have the CL as the head of the noun phrase. So what seems to be happening here, is that, the CL seems to move up to D, the highest um, structural position in the Chinese noun structure. And in the following, Cheng and Subisma's a very famous article, Cantonese classifiers can express definiteness and number. Now, there's a bit more to it, is that, in the subject position, classifier plus noun tends to be definite. So, in Mandarin, we could use the bare noun, such as the example here, so 狗要过马路. So, we simply have 狗, okay, 狗要过马路, okay, this means, dog or dogs, the dog, or, dogs in general want to, across the road. In Cantonese, however, we would use the classifier, so, either in the singular or in the plural. So, 隻狗今日特別聽話, okay, or 啲狗今日特別聽話. So, the dog or the dogs are especially obedient today. So, again, following, so, Cheng and Sabizman's famous arguments, Cantonese classifiers, so here 隻 and 啲 express definiteness and number in examples where the classifier is the head of the noun phrase. Right, so if we look at the Chinese, verbal structure, we tend to have this. And the Cantonese has a structure that's a bit different from Mandarin in that there are separate forms for modal possibility as well as a modal permission. Okay, so verb though and verb that, even though these two forms express meanings that are similar to English can, they mean different things. Verb though means possibility, but verb that means permission. And then we also saw that there are two forms of the progressive aspect, verb 句 which applies to state, and verb 感, which applies to action. So this is again, different from standard Mandarin. Also, we saw that we can use the adverb in the post VP position, such as a scene. Okay, so scene comes after the verb and the object, so it comes after the verb phrase. And then we've got 多 which comes after the verb, but these seem to be adjacent to the verb, so they seem to be non-thematic objects. So if I just summarize here, so in comparison to standard Mandarin, there seem to be new verbal endings in Cantonese, such as verb 句 and verb 感 that denote different types of progressives, and also verb 斗 and verb 得 that express you different type of modal meanings. And also word order, where 先, 多, and 少 they come after the verb in comparison to the pre-verbal positions in the standard Mandarin. And finally, in the noun domain, it seems to be something like this. We know that the Chinese classifier, they can express number, so either singular or plural. However, in Cantonese, in examples where the classifier heads the noun phrase, these seem to be um, the result of head movement, where CL moves to D and they become like articles. They express some definiteness and reference. So yeah, so there seems to be a new syntactic operation here that separates a Cantonese from standard Mandarin, namely CL to D head movement that expresses a definiteness and number. All right, so just to conclude, so there are these formal comparisons between different forms of Chinese that we can pick out. Because if we compare a Mandarin and a Cantonese, so first of all, in terms of verb endings that express different types of TAM values, um, yeah, Mandarin has 着, whereas Cantonese has 句 and 感 that express state or action, respectively. Cantonese, Mandarin 得到 which expresses possibility. In Cantonese, we have 斗 and 得, which means two different things, possibility and permission, respectively. In terms of my word order, we've seen that adverbs such as seen, 多 and 少, these come after the verb or the verb phrase in Cantonese, which is different from the preverbal positions in the standard Mandarin. And finally, in the noun structure, yeah, so in Cantonese, it's possible to have a CL as the initial, as the head of the noun phrase, where they seem to function like articles. Okay, so Cantonese classifiers seem to be able to express definiteness and number, which is different from Mandarin. All right, so my point is, my research into Chinese languages and linguistics has informed my teaching of Chinese as a second language to foreigners, and that's very useful. Thank you very much.